Hi everyone, my name is Savros and welcome back to my channel. We're up by the fire today because I wanted to talk about the Elements of Cadence Duology. And I thought, what better place to do that than by the fire? Now, this duology is written by Rebecca Ross, and I gotta say, I really loved it. Book one was a little bit weaker than book two, but overall, it was an absolutely incredible duology. I listened to the audiobook of this duology, and brief kind of spoiler-free thoughts before jumping into the spoilers. There's not going to be a lot of spoiler-free thoughts because I really want to talk about the story and the things that it made me feel. But brief synopsis of the story is you're following a couple of main characters, but one of the main characters I would say is Jack Tamerlane. And he is a bard. And he's from the island of Cadence in Scotland. And the book starts where basically he's been called back home, summoned back home. He's on the mainland at university, and he's summoned back home. And the story progresses. You find out pretty quickly that there are young girls that are disappearing. And they ask Jack to try and help find the girls. I won't get into too much more than that, but what I will say is that the magic system in this story is very much so based in the elements, and fire being one of those elements. I figured it would be nice to be out here and doing this today. But just in general, it really made me think a lot about nature. I think I'll leave my spoiler-free thoughts there. I highly recommend this book, or the duology, I guess. It was a really nice read. Like I said, the narrator does an incredible job. She's a Scottish person, and so listening to this story with a Scottish accent, it was amazing. It was so nice. And so highly recommend going to listen to this and then coming back and then sharing some of my thoughts. And yeah, I'd love to hear what your thoughts about everything is as well. So recommend coming back after you've read the duology. And if you have read it, let's jump into some spoiler thoughts. So jumping into book one, to kind of start us off here, like I said, I really liked both books. Book one I thought was a little bit weaker, and to be honest, one of the main things that I felt that way about was I really liked the relationship between Jack and Adara, but I did feel a little bit like that relationship was, I don't know, a little bit, it didn't feel as earned as I think I wanted it to feel. And although some of the little jabs and stuff was really cute, at first I thought as we continued, specifically the nickname Old Menace in the audiobook, listening to it being said over and over, it kind of started to grate on me a little bit. But overall, I thought their relationship was really cute. I liked the kind of enemies to lovers kind of thing going on there. That was really nice. I also really liked Turin and Sidra. I thought those two in particular, I know they're technically not the main characters, but I think those two really carry a lot of the story from book one and into book two. They're just really great characters. Sidra in particular, I just really loved Sidra as a character and all the things that she was doing. Just being a healer and yeah, just the care for the elements. It was really beautiful. So in this first book, right, they're trying to figure out what's going on with these missing girls. And eventually, Sidra and Torin's daughter gets taken, and that's obviously a big blow to their self-esteem and their morale. And Torin kind of goes crazy a little bit, like he just is really losing it, really wants to make sure he finds his daughter, obviously. As the story progresses and we're trying to figure out what's going on, and Jack starts to play his music for the spirits, I thought that was a really, like again, the magic system of this story was so beautiful. Just the playing the harp, the elements. We eventually find out that it was Murray Brecken who was stealing the daughters, because Adara, turns out, is actually a Brecken. And he's been doing it to try and, I guess, send a message. I think that Murray's logic behind it was pretty shoddy at best, but it was cool to see that happen and see him kind of, I don't know, get to that point. I thought specifically a scene that really like stood out to me in the first book was when Murray's stealing, like in the process of kidnapping Frey, Jack Singer's sister, and Jack just like does everything he can and plays his harp as much as he can to try and basically drag him back. He just drags him back from stealing Frey, and that was a really, really cool scene. And it took a lot out of Jack for him to do that, but really cool, Jack just knocking him out with his harp. It was such a cool scene. And the one thing that I'll say also that was really good in book one that is a setup for book two that you wouldn't even realize when you're reading it is when we meet Bane, the king of the spirits and the lord or laird of wind. Just kind of like this is a grumpy spirit, okay. But then when we jump into book two, well, actually, before we jump into book two, as we wrapped up book one, and Adara decided to go with her mother, her birth mother, to the West, and Jack decides to stay because apparently music is outlawed in the West. That was also like a really sad way to end that first story, but I knew that there was going to be a second book, so I figured it would get figured out. But Adara has to give away her lairdship of the East, gives it to Torrin, and Torrin doesn't really know what to do with it, but is willing to take it and take up that mantle. And we end basically there with Adara going off to the West and Jack staying back, and Torrin is now the laird of the East. And then jumping into book two kind of takes us right from where we ended with book one. And I really wanted that. I didn't want there to be a big time jump, but it takes us right from where we ended in book one. And the prologue of book two was really interesting because we're getting to see the perspective of one of the spirits of Kai, or Kay, the wind spirit that ends up getting banished from the spirit land by Bane because she refuses to basically starve Jack. And there's starting to at this point be like, why is Bane so scared or gung-ho about Jack, right? Like, what's going on here? But we don't know, and that's okay. Jumping in, Adara starts to kind of realize what the differences are between the West and the East, and they are pretty stark differences. I will say the West is clearly a much more brutal place to be living than the East is. People dueling to the death and like a gladiator style kind of like arena, like a Coliseum arena. Pretty like brutal stuff. But she's doing okay. She poisons herself to make sure she doesn't get kind of poisoned and stuff. Eventually Jack decides to go to the West, and when he does, around that same time, like he gets kidnapped by Rab. Rab also, by the way, absolutely detestable character. Hated Rab. Gets kidnapped by Rab, gets put into the fighting pit, and he has to fight his father. And Jack's not a fighter, we all know that. And almost gets killed by his own father if it hadn't been for Ash, the Laird of Fire, basically luring Adara to stop the fight. So Jack ends up going to the West, and around that same time, Torrin gets taken into the land of the spirits. And no one really knows where he is, and they end up kind of deducing that that's where he is. But now Sidra, who has captured the blight, like she's sick with the blight that is terrorizing the entirety and plaguing the entirety of the island, because Bane is trying to, I guess, enact his revenge on the island. And so many citizens are blighted, and some have died from it. And now Sidra, who finds out that she is pregnant, that she's sick with the blight, has to as well take up the lairdship of the East, while Torin is in the Spirit Land. And basically the story progresses where Jack is trying to figure out what to do, what Ash's instructions are. He meets Kay, and Kay is able to kind of show him what happened and how this division took place between the spirits, how, I'm forgetting his name now, but the old Baird, the old bard of the West, how he basically sang himself into immortality and became the king of the spirits. And so Jack needs to reverse his song and sing a song to get him off of that throne. And while that's happening, Torin is in the spirit realm, and he is trying to solve the riddle, and ends up, through a lot of trial and error, solving the riddle of the cure for the blight. And he cures a bunch of the spirits, and he comes back and he cures a bunch of the citizens. He cures Sidra. There's just so much reparation that's happening in this story. And in the end, Jack ends up playing for the spirits. He plays a song. He dethrones Bane, but disappears. And we kind of guess that he's been now made the king of the spirits himself. And then we have a couple of chapters where Jack is just truly gone, and we don't know what's going to happen. And I remember thinking at that time, if this book ends this way, because it was a really emotional book, it was really good. I loved so much of it. I loved the reuniting of the people. I loved Torin's whole story with the spirits was so good. Jack singing, him and Adara, Sidra, it was all so good. And I was like, if now, after all of this, Jack and Adara don't end up together, this is going to be an insane way to end your story. Because now there's finally reparation between the clans, in large part due to Jack. Also Adara, she played a huge part into it. I was like, if he's gone, that's going to be insane. Thankfully, they did not end it this way. Jack comes back, cuts a deal with the spirits, and ends up giving his kingship, now queenship, to Kay. Which was, again, just a really beautiful way to wrap up that storyline. And yeah, Jack comes back, and he finds Adara, and they walk off into the sunset to go and have dinner with Frey and Meryn and his father, Neil. It was just a really beautiful ending and a really beautiful story. And as I was listening and reading this story, it just really got me feeling and thinking, like, it's so clear that these people of this island of Cadence have such reverence for the spirits and the elements. And I feel like, in general, our modern society, we don't really have a lot of that. Like, I don't have to think about what the earth is doing in order to get my food, right? I don't have to worry about staying warm by a fire. If this fire goes out, I can go inside and I can be warm. I don't have to worry about water. I don't need to worry about wind. Everything that I need I can basically get by a push of a button. But for these folks on this island, if their fire goes out in their house, they're in a bad spot. Their house is going to get cold really quick. So they're constantly having the fire on in their house. If the earth starts to go rotten, then that's going to affect their food and their crops. And so they're so tied to the elements. And in general, we all actually are. We just don't actually think about it very often anymore. And I really appreciated this story for kind of pushing me or forcing me to think about it more. And in general, I've been really looking forward to summer and getting some camping trips in and just being outside in nature again. And so listening to the story really got me feeling like I cannot wait to be out in nature with a fire and just relaxing in nature. And, you know, I'm in my backyard. It's the best I can do for now, but it was really, really beautiful. I really loved that aspect of the story. And like I said, it just gave me a new feeling for, a new appreciation for nature. And also just the way it's described, the way that Cadence is described, like an island within Scotland. I already wanted to go to Scotland, but now I just want to go like so much more. It was just, it just really, really nice. Like all the locks and I don't know. It was really nice. But then also like the other thing that I really liked about this story, my favorite Christmas movie, maybe one of my favorite movies of all time, is Klaus. And in Klaus, there are these two families that are kind of warring against one another and have this blood feud. And I really kind of felt like this book or this duology was like Klaus in Scotland with the elements. And I don't know, I guess I maybe have a thing for that kind of story, for a story where there's two clans that are against one another that realize that the reasons they're against one another are so ridiculous and are so old, right? This old feud that we're just continuing to carry on and on for what? For no reason. And getting to see that repaired, like I said, I guess maybe that's something that, I don't know, I guess I really like that kind of thing. But yeah, I just really, really enjoyed it. It was a great story. And like I said, it just made me really think about nature and the elements. And I just really appreciated it. And I wanted to share my thoughts and my feelings with all of you because it's been a while since a book has made me feel this kind of way, right? I've had many stories that have made me feel very emotional and sad, but this is like I don't know how to describe the exact feeling, but just like I said, like this reinvigoration of, this appreciation for life, I guess, and for nature. So anyways, that's some of my thoughts about the Elements of Cadence Duology. I would love to hear your thoughts about it. If you've read the book, let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. Oh, before I go, I wanted to rate the series. I would probably rate the series as a whole a 4.5 out of 5, the duology as a whole. I would say, like I said, the first book is a little bit weaker than the second book, but the second book really takes off and it's so good. And like I said, I was really worried that Jack wouldn't come back in the end there, but he did. And so, yeah, I would really strongly say that this is a worthwhile read. And so I'd strongly recommend it. If you have read it, like I said, let me know what your thoughts about it are in the comments down below. I'm really curious if it made you feel the same kind of things that it made me feel. I'd love to have a conversation about it, so let me know in the comments below. And until next time,